Well, apparently it is Pride Week in Austin, Texas, in the Austin Independent School System, where some of the elementary schools are mandating pride marches for their elementary school students in the halls. Also, Disney doubles down on being super inclusive to anyone in the LGBTQ AAIP plus $ hashtag group and anyone else, well, who cares? Also, Democrats are going gay in Florida with their billboards that say gay. No, that's not a joke. They actually are putting up billboards in Florida that just say gay. Also, we turn to Christian University because I think this story merits, because many of you have kids and you're thinking, I'll send my kids to a wonderful Christian university. Well, there's a Christian university in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who's now dealing with whether or not LGBTQ AAIP plus hashtag $ is compatible with Reformed Calvinist biblical theology. So that's what you got. Welcome to Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard. Welcome back to Church Public. Thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate it. There is just a lot going on, and I don't know, some of this just continues to be weird, but I just want to bring it to you so that you understand what is going on in the culture. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, or if you hate this, you can just trash it or whatever you need to do with it. I'm just trying to bring you what is going on in the culture from a Christian perspective so that you can live out in this culture the best way that you possibly can. So, a lot of things going on in the news today. I also am going to try to do a segment on the new SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States pick, because there's a lot going on there as well. But before we get to that, and I won't even have time to get to that today because I just want to talk about a bunch of other different things. So the first is that apparently we have Pride Week in Austin, Texas. And what I mean is in the school, like literally the school is promoting Pride Week in the Austin Independent School District, AISD. Sorry, I got that right there. AISD. So they are, well, let me just show you this video. Now, I'm told that this video is actually from last year, but this week right here, they're still having Pride Week apparently in their school. So take a look at this. Now, if you're just watching, if you're just listening and you're not watching the video, this is a bunch of elementary school students with masks on, by the way, which you don't need to have in Texas, but side issue, marching with their flags and their banners that they made in their craft time, apparently, and you probably can't hear it, but they're all chanting pride, 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 and all that kind of thing. So, I was told reliably that you cannot encourage religion in schools, but this kind of thing looks an awfully lot like religion to me. I would be fine. Of course, you'll say this, but I would be fine if you're encouraging people to study the Bible, read the Bible, have a Bible class. I mean, the Bible is literature. Could just be a class. You don't have to indoctrinate in that. But I understand the argument. But this is, I mean, you're telling kids that they have to participate in this. And even if you say, well, you don't have to, like, just imagine the peer pressure or like the top-down power dynamic of a teacher saying, well, you don't have to do this, but everybody else is going to do this. So you don't want to be left out, little Johnny, little Timmy, or little androgynous Allie, who knows? Anyway, so here's the problem, right? These kids are being forced to march down the hallways and chant pride, pride, pride. And do they know what's going on? Do they know what this is all about? I have no idea. But let's take a deeper look because some documents have been leaked. And thanks in part on some of this to Libs of TikTok and some other news outlets where I found some of these things. But here is one of them. And this is some of what they're going to do in the Pride Week community. And this is for, if you can't see, again, I'll read some of this. You may want to go look at this and you can pause it and read through. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. But this is what they're going to do for some of the Pride Week in pre-K through 2, through second grade. You can see right at the top. I can't point the right way. PK through 2. So they're going to talk about families. They're talking about respecting differences. And, of course, talking about no room for hate. I mean, okay, that's all fine and good, if that were really the definition of what we're talking about. But of course, as you know, in the agenda, the radical sexual agenda that we're talking about, that's not really what we're talking about. When you say family, where some of us might have a definition of family, mother, father, child, that's not what we're talking about. And I'm not going to read through most of this again. I do want to point out, and this was pointed out online, but it bears repeating. Down at the bottom here, there's a highlighted section, and it says there's a respect privacy policy, and it says what we say in this room stays in this room. Now, I may be wrong, but that's kind of like an Alcoholics Anonymous thing, right? Like, you want to tell your story and you don't want people to repeat your story, maybe. Those are for alcoholics who are adults, or, NA or whatever, any of the A's, right? This is for pre-kindergartners, PK, through second graders, and you're saying the policy of the school is for the kids to not tell their parents what happens? Is that a little bit concerning to anybody? Like, that's very concerning to me. What in the possible world could a teacher or a school administrator be telling your child that they're not allowed to repeat to their parents? That should be very disconcerting. And again, here's one of the reasons I bring this story up to you. I know California has fallen off the map. I lived in California for most of my life. I know some of the other states are just absolutely wacky, especially as you go up the coasts. This is in Texas. And okay, sure, you can say, well, it's Austin and Austin's wacky. I think that's even like their catchphrase is like, keep Austin wacky or weird or something. But it's still in Texas. So you can't say, oh, this is only in one small part of Texas. Sure, but people grow up and then they move and then they move to other parts. I mean, you can't say this is allocated in a single part. It's still in Texas. This is still in a very red, a very conservative, ostensibly, right, place. So it's very important to point out stories like this, that these things are happening. And so I have one more little clip from this. And again, this is, here's one of the questions. Does Pride Week have a meaning or significance for you or your family? Again, quote unquote family. But again, at the bottom here, what I want to point to is it says, close the circle. Thanks for participating. Please remember, we agreed to what happened in this circle is confidential. Again, I'm sorry, what? You're telling kids that whatever you talked about is confidential? What did you talk about? Like, I know I keep coming back to this thing, this whole in loco parentis, and we don't think about that, and we don't talk about Latin at any time, right? But that just means in place of parents, right? You're giving your kids, you're giving the permission to the educators to educate your kids in place of you. This is that whole argument that's going on right now all across the country. Do teachers, because they're credentialed and because they have all the education and things, are they the ones who know what's best for your kids? Do they love your kids more than you? Do they care about your kids more than you? Or perhaps, since God gave you the children, are you, the parent, supposed to be the one who's in charge of your child's education? And is even our government set up that way, where you have school boards that are supposed to oversee and the parents are supposed to speak into the school boards and vote for the people that represent them, et cetera, et cetera? It's kind of how it's supposed to work. But now we've gone off the rails where the teachers or administrators are saying, we're going to do things with your children and we're going to tell your children, don't worry about what we're doing in this school. In fact, don't tell your parents what we're doing in this school, because this is just a little secret in between you and me. Now, this word has been going around a lot, and I even hesitate to say it, but this really is like a grooming activity. When someone says to your kid, we're going to talk to you about sexual things, but don't tell your parents what we're talking about, I don't know what else to call that. Like, other than sexual grooming. I mean, like, what is this? Like, what are we talking about here? We're going to have a deep conversation about gender, about sex, about preferences, about family styles and like different family styles from, traditional family styles. And don't tell your parents about what we're talking about. That is very concerning. And that should be incredibly concerning to you. It kind of should make you angry. I feel a little angry coming on right now. I'm trying to keep it under control, trying to keep it like down a little bit, but this is not a good thing. So we want to be very careful as we're thinking through these things, as we're talking through these things, as we see these stories come up. And that's the reason I bring you these stories, and I bring you them from all over the country wherever I can, because it's important to understand that these things are happening all over the place. And this is an agenda, and it's an agenda that apparently is gathering steam. And we need to know about it. And you need to, maybe your kid can survive through public school. Maybe they can. And if you are doing that, I just want you to have your eyes open as you go into this. And you'll sit there and think, and you'll respond to me, and you'll say, I hear it. I hear you saying it right now. This isn't happening in my child's school. I live in a super conservative place. I live in a town where none of this stuff happens. I'm just telling you, it probably is. It may not be as overt as this, but I'm telling you, these things are getting in, and it's not localized. It may be more extreme in some of these edge places, but it's happening pretty much everywhere. And I know you're sitting there saying, I don't believe you. Like, it's not real. This isn't something that's happening everywhere. Again, it may not be this extreme. And I chose an extreme example, sure, but it is happening. And the evidence of that is when you see these students grow up and, I don't know what to say, infiltrate some of these giant corporations and then take over the corporations from the inside out. And you're seeing that with corporations like Disney. And I just showed you that on the past episode. You can go back and listen to that on any of the podcast platforms or churchpublic.com. You can listen to it. You can go to the video on the podcast tab at the top. I went through a bunch of things that Disney is doing. Marvel is doing the same thing. We'll look at that just a little bit today as well. But their corporation has been turned upside down from the inside out. And it actually is very clear that it is a vocal, it may be a minority, it may be a majority in Disney's case, but in most corporations, it's a minority of people that are pointing this way, but they're very strong and they're very loud. There's even this principle that says you don't even need, a majority of people in a situation to change the tide. You really only need like 20%. And that gets into the weeds of how you shape culture. And I'm not going to get into that necessarily right now, but there is a large vocal group of mostly younger people who are saying this is the thing we are doing, and you're going to do it with us whether you want to or not. And so we need to pay attention when these things are happening. So for instance, Disney, again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. You can go and listen to it over the Don't Say Gay bill, quote unquote, which doesn't exist in Florida because it's a family bill that says specifically, the reason I bring these up together in this Austin example, it says you can't do this kind of thing in school. That's really what it says, especially in like pre-K through third grade and then graduated up through different grades with different examples. It says you cannot talk specifically about sex and gender outside of basic biology. And even at below that level, below 10 years old, 9 years old, you really shouldn't be talking about it really at all. It's not the place for it. That's what the bill says. Again, I read through most of it the other day. You can go listen to it again. You can look up the text of the actual bill. Don't believe me if you don't want to. Go and listen to the actual bill. One, it doesn't say gay at all. But two, it's just saying you cannot indoctrinate children, especially under third grade, in these kinds of things, which we're seeing, again, here in Austin, right? And all over the place. I've shown you California schools. I've shown you other schools. Like it literally is happening all over the place. And Florida, the governor said, and the legislation said, no, we shouldn't do this to kids. And if you think, if you're on the side of fighting to hide the sexuality and gender things from the parents and teach the kids in this, I just want you to reevaluate where you are on that, because I cannot see a situation where that's good for a child. Anyway, so Disney continues to come out and fight this head on. And the employees got in a fight with their CEO. Again, I talked all about that. The CEO first said, we're not going to do that much. Then the CEO said, okay, like I'll do a little bit. And then they still weren't happy. And so finally, I think it was yesterday. And let me just pull this up. This is Disney World came out with this and said, to all who come to this happy place, welcome. And if you can't see this, it's on their Instagram page. It's still there as far as right now. You can go look at it. It's the Mickey head, but it's not just the pride colors anymore, because I don't know if you've been paying attention. We've talked about the flag a few times, but the pride flag is now not good enough, because you also have to introduce the other letters of the LGBTQ AAIP plus # alphabet into it, plus the BIPOC things, which are at the top of this. So it's all the colors of, I can't even say the rainbow anymore because there's extra colors, whatever. How do you describe these things? Anyway, it's Mickey Mouse filled with all the colors. Then it says, to all who comes to this happy place, welcome. Disney Parks Experience and Products. Is committed to creating experiences that support family values for every family and will not stand for discrimination in any form. We oppose any legislation that infringes on basic human rights and stand in solidarity and support to our LGBTQIA+. That wasn't even me saying it that time. That's written down. Cast, crew, guests, and fans who make their voices heard today and every day. So just a couple of points in there. Again, it says we want every family to feel comfortable. Really, do you? Because it seems like you're saying if you're a traditional family, you have to get along with where this is going. The party of tolerance is not super tolerant if you don't get along with the program. And so Disney is saying they have to do this. And just as an aside, Marvel had put out a similar thing the other day. We strongly denounce any and all legislation that infringes on the basic human rights of the LGBTQIA+ community. Marvel Studios stands for hope, inclusivity, strength, and we proudly stand with the community. Today, we pledge and continue our strong commitment as allies who promote the values of equality, acceptance, and respect. And if you can hear the dog barking in the background, I apologize for that. You just do what you can do. Anyhow, so you have Disney, you have Marvel specifically. I mean, those notes are specifically standing against this family bill in Florida that they've dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, which is, of course, not what it's called. But in solidarity, of course, you have the Democrats who are coming out, as I mentioned in the opener, specifically saying gay in their billboards. Here's a billboard, if you don't believe me. They're literally putting up billboards that just say gay. So they've won the fight by saying gay as tall and loud as possible. That's really all I have to say about that. It's not in the bill. Go and read the bill. Don't believe me. Again, I've gone over this again and again. I don't even feel like going over it again. You can go and look. It's not in the bill. The bill is trying to protect pre-K through third grade plus other grades in terms of gender and sexual indoctrination from teachers and administrators, which I just showed you at the beginning of this, is literally happening in schools. And that's just one example. And I have so many examples. I don't have time or even the inclination to show you all of the weird and crazy examples. And some of them, frankly, like there's a bunch of examples that I came across that are, I would say, X-rated. I mean, I couldn't even show you if I wanted to. I wouldn't show them to you because they are so gross. I mean, I'm talking about like literal, I can't even say, where there's like animated books and cartoons that they are showing to children in some of these schools. And it might make you blush. I'm just saying. And this is to elementary school students, sometimes high school students, but mostly it's elementary school students. And again, these things are happening and it's weird and gross. And in any other context, I said this the other day because I tried to put it into perspective, right? If this were any other context, if it were just, say, a random person who walked up to a park and started showing children pictures of different genders and ideologies, arrested, jail, rightly so. If this were a church where they're doing these things, arrested, jail, rightly so. But for some reason, we think it's fine if the teachers are doing it because they know better, don't they? Right? Don't they? No, I'm sorry, they don't. They don't know better. This is just, it's wrong in every situation, and it's just weird and wrong. And the fact that people are fighting over this and fighting to include this kind of material in schools, it just literally blows my mind. Like it just, I don't know where to go with that. I don't know. I mean, we're going to read a verse in a moment out of 2 Timothy that I actually think gives us some clarity about what's happening and that we knew it was going to happen. But I do want to give you one more story, and that is out of good old Michigan. And I lived in Michigan for a while, so I understand the culture a little bit. And I mean, it's fine. It's a fine place, and it's a little bit cold. Gotta be honest, it's a little cold there. I'm glad I'm not living through the snow. My kids are like, we miss the snow. And I'm like, that's just because you didn't have to plow it 2 times a day in minus 20 degrees. But that's a side point. So there's Calvin University, and Calvin University is ostensibly a biblically reformed university. And if you know anything about biblically reformed theology, I mean, it is very reformed. It is very stringent. It is very strict. And there is a big reformed community in Michigan. One of the biggest probably in the country in Michigan. And if you look into biblically reformed theology, if you know anything about it, again they're very strict. Sometimes even too strict. That's where a lot of the Puritan ideas come from, is this kind of theology. In fact, a lot of them kind of migrated up into Michigan, and again, that's a longer story of history that I'm not going to get into right now. But what we have is a little bit of weird controversy at Calvin University. And literally, it's got Calvin in the name. I mean, right? If you name your university after Calvin, the central figure in the Reformed community, you would think you'd be following Reformed doctrine, Reformed theology. Anyway, here's the reason this story is of note. Because I said, I think in the opening, that a lot of you, I've talked to people about university. I've talked about secular university. I had a conversation just this last weekend with some people who were like, well, what about, Bible universities or Christian universities, and that's safe. And I'm like, well, just check. That's all I want to say. Like, just do your homework, just check. And we talked about a very big and well-named university that I'm not going to name here today. But if you want to message me about, I'll give you more about. That sounded like a Christian university until you started peeling back the layers. And here goes another one, Calvin University, where they're having this issue right now where one of the professors was asked to and performed a wedding ceremony for another staffer and another person. And the two people that were married were two women. So it was a same-sex marriage that was performed by one of the professors, including one of the staff members. Now, again, I know this kind of stuff happens, but here's the thing, like, this school, like, what is interesting to me about this article is this school is kind of wrestling with, what do we do about this? And so this happened, I believe, October of last year. And so they say things like, they're trying to strike a balance. They say striking a balance has become difficult as more and more Americans, including students in Christian schools, identify as LGBTQ. And they actually cite a Gallup survey that I've talked about before, but 1 in 5 Americans in the younger generation, the Z generation, identifies LGBTQ. 1 in 5. That's 20-something%. And some surveys I've looked at say it's even higher than that. And so this is a reality, and I get that. But if you are ostensibly, if you are trying to be both a Christian university and a Christian Reformed university with Calvin in your name, you would think you would say, well, you can come here or you cannot. This is what we're going to teach. And if you can't see, I'm going to point to my Bible and say, hey, we're going to teach the Bible and we're going to teach doctrine, and you can follow the doctrine or you cannot follow doctrine, but that's what we're going to teach at the school. That's what I would say. But again, I understand that some people are tied to the dollar, and they're like, well, if we say that, people aren't going to come. Right. Maybe when Paul says to Timothy, not everybody should be a teacher, or not everybody is going to be able to follow. Like when the Romans, like, we're all sinners and we're all fallen and we're all going to struggle. Maybe he was right. Maybe, like, this is part of it. Maybe we don't get to live however we want to live because we feel like it, or we're born this way, or whatever we want to say. Like, I talked about those values the other day, but okay. Yeah. This article that I'm reading here, which is in Religion News, which talks about this university, they say, quote, most younger Americans see LGBTQ inclusion as non-negotiable, which puts them at odds with conservative older Christian leaders and evangelical institutions. Yes, it does. Of course it does. Because the Bible is a tradition, and the biblical tradition is a certain way. And following after Jesus puts you into a biblical tradition that we don't get to choose. We follow the tradition of what Jesus said. That's pretty much it. You could try to interpret it how you want, but you can't really change the words if you still say you're going to follow. And so what they did was, this staff person, she worked for a different place. And so they tried to, like, take that research center and section it off and make it something different that wasn't connected to the college. So it was like 2 different organizations, but they're just embroiled in this really weird deal. It was called, I guess, the Center for Social Research or something like that. And so the Calvin University separated from the Center for Social Research, and so then it was okay to have this other person there, but it it's not okay. Like that's the thing. Like either you believe this and either you follow after Jesus or you don't. Either you are going to stand up for values or you're not. And this is where, courage comes into play. This is where you decide, like, do I really believe this? Am I really going to follow this? Am I not going to follow this? Sometimes it doesn't feel good. Sometimes it doesn't feel good to say, well, I know you're living a certain way and I can have sympathy for how difficult that is. And this is me talking, like it really is. I can have sympathy for how difficult it is to live a certain way. But that doesn't mean it's living the right way. That doesn't mean you can keep living that way and follow after Jesus. This is the thing that we all, again, back to Romans 3, like we all deal with this. We all sin. We all make mistakes. We all struggle. We all fall down. And yet Jesus says, follow me. And deny yourself and live after him. And this is what we have to do if we want to follow after him. It's not up to you to decide, well, I really feel a certain way. I feel strongly this way, so I'm going to live this way. And you don't get to do that. You get to either decide to follow after Jesus or make your own way. And if you make your own way, I guess that's fine, but don't say you're a Christian and don't say you're following after Jesus. You're just not. And that's this space that we're in and that we continue to move into. And I was talking the other day about, like, well, why has, we just looked at that stat from Gallup, why has it escalated so quickly from literally like almost around 1% a few decades ago to 20%? That's a huge increase in people identifying as LGBTQ. Why would that be? Well, take a look at the schools. That's why these stories are connected. Take a look at the younger schools. The younger schools are saying these things, doing these things, making kids do these things, maybe even saying to the kids, we're going to do this and you shouldn't even tell your parents about it. And they have been doing this for decades. That's the thing that most people don't know, don't want to know, haven't paid attention to, don't care about. They just sent their kids off to school and said, you figure it out. Like, you'll be fine. Just go and exist in the school and everything's going to work out fine. It's not working out fine. It's not working out fine at all. And these things, these stories are the evidence of it. And when you look at, well, there are some good teachers out there. Yes, there are totally good teachers out there. I know some fantastic teachers out there. But there are also teachers who grew up in the system and now they're teaching, and this was what they went through. This is what they taught. This is what they were taught. And now this is, of course, what they're teaching. I mean, it totally makes sense. And then there are those that graduate and they go into these corporations and they say, oh, this corporation is structured traditionally. We can't have that. We have to structure this corporation to be more pro-LGBTQ, etc. Of course, this all makes sense. It's all linear. It all is literally by name progressive. This is progressing to a certain thing. The only problem is the view, when you take a step back and look at it, their progression states that when all of these other traditional barriers are removed, you're going to end in this wonderful utopian place where everyone loves each other, and that's where they say there's no room for hate. That's the goal. The goal is to get to this place where it's a wonderful utopia and there's no room for hate. The only problem is it just doesn't work that way. That's not how it works. They're, one, leaving out a large section of the society that doesn't feel comfortable with this, but two, this isn't really what it is. You can't invent your own paradise. It just doesn't work. People have tried for literally all of time, all of human history, and it's never worked, and it's not going to work. And we know why. Again, go back to Romans. Read through Romans if you haven't lately. Paul tells us very clearly why we can't do this on our own. And that may seem, if you've been in church for a while, it may seem old, it may seem old-fashioned, it may seem boring, it may seem staunch, but that's just the way God has prescribed it. It's not even me talking. And so we have to grab some courage and say, well, I'm going to go with God on this one. And you don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. You just have to decide whether you're going to follow or not. That's the faith part. That's the step of we follow God or we don't. And we as Christians have been far too nice about this. And I'm not saying be mean. By no means am I saying be mean. We should always be nice. But if you're so nice that you just throw all this out the window and say, well, okay, you just live however you want to live and we'll all still get to heaven. Ugh, that's in the heretical pile. Like, sorry, that's not how it works. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So you either follow Jesus or you don't. That's really the only way. And I want that for you. I want you to do this. And sometimes it's not easy. It's not easy because following after God requires sacrifice. And it's a different kind of sacrifice than we think. It's sacrificing ourselves. Jesus has already sacrificed himself, and we follow him through that and sacrifice ourselves, our wants, our desires, our ideals, our feelings. But most of us don't want to do that. Most of us want to say, I'd really like to get to heaven because that sounds great. I really like the idea of paradise. Can I make my own way there rather than going through the hard road? And Jesus says, well, sorry, no. There are two roads. One of them is wide, really nice. There might have been a band who sung about that road. It doesn't lead where you think it leads. And one of them is narrow and kind of difficult. But that's the road that is leading to that paradise that you want. You just have to go in the certain direction to get there. This is the place that we live in. So I did want to leave you with some scripture before we go, because I think this one I alluded to a bunch in Romans and some other ones that Jesus said, but this is Paul talking to Timothy, and I think this is a good one because it reminds us of what is really going on here. This is 2 Timothy 4, and he's talking to Timothy and saying, hey, the world is going to change, and it's going to change quickly. And while this happens, here's what you should do. 4 verse 2. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, encourage with great patience and careful instruction. For the time will come when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires. I think the ESV or NASB is a better translation that I like. It says, some people want to get their ears tickled. I just really like that. Because that's what it is. You're like, hey, just tell me what I want to hear, right? Instead, to suit their own desires or to get their ears tickled, they will gather around a great number of teachers who say what their ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. But you keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and discharge the duties of your ministry. There's Paul saying, this is the age that we're in. This is where we are, and this is what's going to happen. And in fact, of course, you and I know that we're living in this age right now. People just go to find places to hear what they want to hear. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what God says. And you might not even want to hear it. Even if you've been a Christian for a long time, you might say, well, that's insensitive, or all the ist words, right? Misogynist and bigoted and all those words. You might say that. And frankly, I'm just going to side with God on this. He says, like, try to have patience and careful instruction. I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to do the best I can. I don't always get that perfect. I understand that. But I'm going to try to do the best I can on that. And while we're doing that, we do have to encourage. He says, like, you have to correct, you have to rebuke, you have to exhort. I hear a lot of people saying that you just need to love. Just love your neighbor. That's it. It's easy as that. Just love. That's all you have to do. Just accept and love. That's not what this is saying. This is saying correct, rebuke, like encourage people in the right way. This is what we're supposed to do. And that's not judging. It's saying, like, if you want to say you're following Jesus, if you are working at a reformed seminary, you probably should be reformed. You probably should follow after God. You probably should do the things that the Bible says. It's really, again, I say this all the time, and I hope you don't get tired of me saying it, but it's really not that complicated. Read the Bible, do what it says. That's it. Read the Bible, do what it says. Now, it's not necessarily easy, because that makes you go into places where you're going to go against culture, you're going to go against yourself, you're going to go into all these different places. But it's not that complicated. Just read it and do it. That's really it. And Jesus wants you to do that. And I hope you do that. And I hope you follow after God in all of these things with your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength. And through all that, I hope that you keep the faith. God bless. See you next time.